What does a flow state look like to you?
Effortless. It doesn't look like that, it feels effortless. No resistance. No overthinking. Moving with a feeling. Consequence after consequence, which turns into coincidence. Which is no real coincidence. You're in flow. Yeah.
How often do you find yourself in a state of flow in your everyday life?
Oh. It feels like a snowball in my life. Like I started as a small snowball and I feel like the snowball is getting larger and larger with more and more flow, more momentum behind it, more trust. Yeah. The more I stick to and align myself with my higher self through meditation, body awareness, practicing love for myself, my family, the land. The more I deepen my connection, my relation, and my right relation with country and my family and myself, the more I find myself in flow.
Can you tell me a little bit about your the early chapters in your life and where you were born and how that informs who you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I was born in the Eora Nation in Sydney, and from there I moved back to my father's country in Jiru country in far northern Queensland, Innisfail. My heritage runs back to the Torres Strait Islands, to the Mugrem tribe of Mer Island, which is the furthest eastern island on the Torres Strait where the dreaming of the Great Barrier Reef begins. And also from Pajinka Wik, which is in Cape York Peninsula, up in the deep far north of Queensland. My mother's of Scottish descent, she's a Ferguson. So the chapters begin all there with my ancestors. And then the land which I grew up on, which grew me up, Mission Beach, Innisfail, yeah, like I said, Jiru country, Irukandji country, Cassowary country, Crocodile country. And it was, we were the only Indigenous family, the only dark-skinned kids at our school. Although only half an hour away, all my other cousins and were living, and I felt different. I was taunted with racist remarks. My name's Waangengo. People would dissect my name and call me the one nigger. And I knew that I needed a superpower in order to keep me safe. And, I was a child of the 80s, and Michael Jackson was the biggest thing. And I would mimic his movement, and it would empower me and give me strength and would give me praise and set me apart. And so that was the beginning of, using my body for story, to entertain others, to set myself apart in the right way, that wasn't going to bring me any negative attention. I always, it was mimicking Michael Jackson. It was becoming a character. It was stepping outside of the Waangengo suit and becoming something larger than life, and which would connect me in a way to my hero. and connect my friends and those who were observing, my friends and family, to their hero as well. I was the closest thing to Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
It was a really amazing feeling.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until I watched my uncles and aunts who founded the first Aboriginal and Islander dance company called AIDT back in 89, that I saw them perform a work. It was in 91 called Harold. It was about an Indigenous opera singer, the first Indigenous opera singer, Harold. And they came to our local town hall and performed the show. And what they were doing was fusing our old dance, our old ways of dancing, traditional dance, with contemporary dance and ballet and jazz. And they were just there, this meeting of this old and the new. And for the first time, I was really proud of our culture. And then I guess when I was, and then I was in my teen years and I was getting into like, from heavy metal, listening to, like, I played in a metal band, or new metal, when, you know, Korn and Limp Bizkit and Deftones were the thing in like the late 90s. And I sung in a band, and I felt, more than singing, I danced on stage, and I was like, I was the hype boy, and I'd really get everyone moving, and that was, I found that really empowering as well. And it was all within my body, just using my body. And then I got into electronic music around 16, 17, and then going to, you know, bush stuffs and liberating my mind as well through movement and the music. The music was, you know, I hadn't discovered drugs yet. It was all natural highs. It was these endorphins just being set off in my body, and it, like, something would take over. Something would, you know, it would move through me. And as most people know who really enjoy their dancing. And then when I left home, when I finished year 12, I went and decided to study dance. And I didn't tell any of my friends because I was embarrassed. Not embarrassed, but I was afraid to tell them because it's just too out of the ordinary. Coming
from like a small, like, regional town like that as well, there might be some anxiety about it.
Oh yeah, of course. And the assumption that I would be gay. You know, people go, you're if you dance, you're gay. And I was like, well, am I? I don't think so, but I was. It made me really unsure.
How old were you at this stage?
17.
Yeah, right.
17. So I started, you know, I was at this dance school in Sydney, and this particular dance school was, everybody at that school was of Aboriginal or Islander descent, and it's called NAISA, it's the National Aboriginal and Islander Skills Development Association. And it was basically a big tapas plate of movement. Like, you do jazz, you do tap, you do modern dance, contemporary, ballet, yoga, Pilates, musical theatre, and then each week you'd do cultural dance. You'd learn traditional dances, and we'd have different tutors coming from different regions in Australia and doing these residencies with us for 2 weeks, where we'd learn their songs and their dances, either from an Aboriginal community or a Torres Strait Islander community. And it was funny that I had to go to the city to really learn about my culture and learn these dances. And so this dance school I was there for 3 to 4 years, and through that time I was really starting to just become aware of my body and the power within it, and how to really harness the power to effectively tell these stories or share stories.
How did you feel? Sounds like you went through quite a journey, and you really came to life, and you were feeling empowered and big. How did you feel when you went back to your hometown? Like, how are you managing that paradox?
Yeah. Well, I copped it when I went home. I remember my first time I went home, I was at a pub, and I remember I was dancing with a girl, and I was, I thought, I was feeling good. I was grooving down, and a guy just came up to me and headbutted me, cracked my nose, and I was like, whoa, where did that come from? Why did that happen? And then the girl said, oh, they all think you're a faggot, and I was like, phew, oh, wow. Okay. And that was 2001, my first journey home after that. But I still felt strong in myself. I knew that I was following my gut and my heart. I knew that the path I had chosen was scary, but it felt right, because the more I would step into my courage and move my body and stretch my body, the more I felt my brain was stretching and expanding, the more knowledge I'd put into technique and just the discipline of it, the 9 to 6 of just 4 classes a day. And then I guess after 3 years, I had 1 more year left of study, and then I got offered a contract with Bangarra Dance Theatre. And Bangarra was the development of the Aboriginal Islander Dance Theatre. It birthed into this bigger company, and it was getting government funding, and it was touring around the country and internationally, and it was the pioneering Indigenous storytelling company of Australia. And I was offered a contract in 2004, and I didn't quite feel like, I just couldn't believe it was happening, but at the same time, it was the natural progression from where I was going. I wasn't interested in joining Sydney Dance Company or a mainstream contemporary dance company. I wanted to share our stories.
How do you sort of mentally, physically, and spiritually prepare yourself before you put all your energy in front of a group of strangers?
Strangers are the easier ones.
Oh, yeah.
Performing for strangers is always easier than it would be doing something for my family, an intimate gathering. But I had always known and felt the presence of my ancestors simply by pressing my fingers to my pulse and feeling my blood running through my veins. I felt my ancestors there. I could feel them gathered behind me and around me. Each time I'd dance for my great-grandmother, I was fortunate enough to meet. And she lived to be 99 years old, and she she brought up my father and his 5 siblings, because his mother passed away at a very young age. So I had this strength. I knew that it wasn't just me. I knew that the responsibility was to carry I was the voice of my ancestors. And so there was no space for shame. There was no space for self-doubt. I had always had this really strong belief in my culture, my people, my family, and ultimately myself, carrying that. So preparation would be, it was the years leading up to it. It was the getting up at 7:30 on really cold winter mornings in Sydney, and Sydney was super cold after growing up in the tropics, and showing up each day. And it felt like, being at that dance school, it felt like I was at Fame. I'd never been around so many creatives and so many Indigenous peers, and it was so exciting each day. Every day was so exciting, and I had this real romanticism ingrained in me about the struggling artists as well. So the more I would make myself suffer in it, the more I was.
So the turtlenecks and cigarettes and
cigarettes, turtlenecks, and jockstraps. And ballet shoes, point shoes. But the preparation was always like,
Have you had experience? I'm sure you have. Have you had experiences where you're on stage and you lose your thread, you lose your flow state?
Yes.
What do you do?
Well, the great thing is if you're doing a solo, no one else is. you're not getting out of step or time, which is most often. If I was to lose it, I'd be performing on my own. Within a group, I'm always held, and there's always someone else to catch on to the movement with. More often than not, I feel so safe on the stage. You've got lights beaming at you. You can't see the audience. But there's moments where I was on the shoulders of another dancer, and we had all ochre running over all our bodies coated, and I slipped off his body, and it was so obvious that I had just slipped and collapsed, and I just used it. I used that collapse, and I used the struggle of that, and I just exaggerated it. And I just brought it into the story because no one out in the audience really knows what the steps are, and they don't really know there's a mistake unless you just stare out like a deer in headlights, So I never really lose flow state, but in saying that, if I overdo a dance, if I've done that dance for like 4 months, 6 days a week, like 8 shows a week, it just can be so monotonous, and you can go into this autopilot, and then you're sort of out of that flow state because you're just not. So after 14 years in that company, I loved it. It was incredible. But towards the end, I was just losing the love of dance. I was losing the magic and the medicine of dance. And it was when I left the company that I really started to explore the healing in movement. Yeah. Because it was always for a performative outcome when I was in the company. It was all about getting it shiny and sharp and clean and clear for the audience. And I wasn't so much dancing for myself or my culture anymore. I was sort of just doing it for the paycheck, doing it for So you're doing some work now with just, for lack of a better word, like somatic therapy or like sort of movement therapy. If someone's watching this and maybe they're struggling and feeling a bit frozen or a bit stuck in their body, do you have some advice for how they might be able to sort of unlock a little bit of liberation in their body and minds? Yeah. I mean, first thing is just to do motorboats with the lips, just to go, and that ultimately just relaxes all the back of the skull, and it sends all these vibrations to the back of the head, which soothes and sort of brings you into more of a parasympathetic state. I always like to feel my feet into the earth or rub my fingers into my thumbs. I like to check on my breath, and by checking on my breath, I like to put my hand on my belly because that's where I want the breath to go. I want it to go deep into the pit of my. I say that there's this flame, or there's these deep embers, rich coals that lie in our bellies, and when we inhale, we see these coals just light gently with a glow of orange and red. And that's where I want to send the breath, because that's the calm, still center space, And I also place my hand on my heart. Just by holding my heart, it regulates it, just gently pressing the north, south, and east and west of my heart. And also just checking on that I'm not catching the breath in my chest, that it's moving all the way deep into my gills and deep into the pot belly of my fire. Yeah. And I like to just, those simple things, lick my lips, blink my eyes, but, let out a big sigh,
Where do you hold tension in your body when you notice your days?
My traps.
Traps.
Yeah. And that's from years of partnering and lifting people on my shoulders, and I hold it in my traps. I can get really oos. So I've got to constantly